please. Oh, Vanessa, you're muted.
Of course I am. Sorry, let me start again. Hopefully you can all see my slides. Welcome to our workshop today. So this is level 2 of the Open Reviewers workshop. So we're here today to go through some tips for writing clear and constructive feedback to research manuscripts. And at the end of today's call, we're going to have a bit of a poll for you to, a survey actually, that will send to you a form to select which preprint you would like to read, and then sort of put into practice everything we talk about today in reviewing collaboratively together a preprint. So I should say that you are on camera today. We are recording this call, as I believe this recording will be made available to all trainees of the cohort and the workshop organisers, but will not be shared publicly. My name is Vanessa, so you may remember me from level 1, but I am Head of Community at PREreview. My own academic background is in applied and professional ethics, and I live in Oxford in the UK, and I use she, her pronouns. And with me today is my colleague Daniela, so I'll pass over to Daniela just to say a bit of an introduction.
Thank you, Vanessa, and thank you, Lamith and Emmanuel, for inviting us again here. It's a pleasure to be here with you all. I am Daniela Saderi. I use she, her pronouns. I was born in Italy, in Sardinia specifically, an island in the Mediterranean, and I came to the United States in 2012, specifically in Portland, Oregon, where I live now. I still live to conduct a PhD in neuroscience. So I am a trained neuroscientist, and but fell in love with open scholarship, and really fell in love with the community of people like you all who are here to make the space better. And I'm really in awe of people that can, at the same time, be researchers and practicing scientists, and also invest their time into making research better for everybody else. So I'm really thankful to be in this space with you today. This is a picture of me with a fox. It's the Mozilla fox, and a colleague. I was a Mozilla fellow, and that is kind of was my step into the space of open science, and a kind of a broader group of people around the world that are really passionate about making a change. And these are Sam and Monica up here on the top right, and they are the co-founders of PREreview with me back in 2017. And down here are my 2 children. And I really need to update that photo, but I live in Portland with 2 children and my husband and 2 cats. Thank you.
Thanks very much. So we're just going to go over some of our group agreements for our call today. So please add your name and how you would like to be addressed into the roll call and dual document if you feel comfortable doing so. The link to the notes document is in the chat, and I have updated the access. Sorry about that. If you were unable to access it when you first tried clicking the link, I recommend trying again and letting us know if that then works. This workshop follows the Chatham House rule. So that means that anyone here is free to use any of the information from our discussions, but please do not attribute any particular comments to any particular person. Feel free to eat, stretch, move away as much as you need to during the course of our call today. You can always ask any questions at any point by either using the raise hand function in Zoom, and then we'll ask you to unmute, or you can type your questions into the chat and one of us will get back to you. Please do try to make space for others who may feel less comfortable or confident talking than you, particularly in breakout rooms, and we'll have some additional guidance for those when we get to them. And please do be open to, curious, and respectful of different opinions and experiences. We also have a code of conduct at PREreview. So we do encourage everybody, expect everybody to use welcoming and inclusive language, provide feedback that is constructive, be respectful of differing viewpoints and experiences, gracefully accept constructive criticism yourself, and please do show empathy towards other participants and community members. If you do feel uncomfortable or unwelcome at any point during today's meeting, you can always send an email to report@prereview.org, or we also have a optionally anonymous incident report form that you can fill in. You can also always send me or Daniela a direct message in the chat at any point during the call as well. So to start us off today, we're going to have a bit of a recap from level 1 and what we covered there. So level 1 was a few weeks ago now, so I just want to make sure that we all remember what we covered during those sessions, and as a way to sort of bring us into the content that we're going to go through today. So peer review, as we covered, is a complex process that takes many different shapes and shades. There's different ways of doing peer review, there's different levels of openness. Some forms are more open than others, and some aspects are more inclusive than others. At PREreview, we are here to challenge the status quo, and we want to move together towards a more open and equitable peer review process. So as our first sort of prompt or question of today, can anyone remember the things that we talked about when we are, or things that we mean when we are talking about open peer review? What makes peer review open? So again, you can either unmute or you can write your answer in the chat.
And it's not something you have to remember necessarily from our discussion, even though, that's what we're trying to do with recap. But like, I guess even, what comes up if you ask yourself, what makes peer review open? What does open peer review mean to you? And it doesn't have to be related to what we talked about, but just. Thank you.
Everyone has access to review the work. Mm-hmm. So openness of participation. Any other suggestions or thoughts? Reliability to information. So I'm guessing this means more, access to the peer review reports themselves. Any other comments? Credit, yeah. Quality of work. The reviewers are known wholly or at some point. Yeah. Yeah, great. And some of these things we'll also talk about in a second as well. But these are some of the things that we talked about last time when we talked about what sorts of things make peer review open. So as a reminder, this could be open identities. So this can be when authors and reviewers' identities are known to each other. Open reports, so the peer review reports themselves are published online and are openly available. Open participation, which someone mentioned in the chat, so that anyone can contribute to the review process. Open interaction, so discussions and comments between authors and reviewers or between the reviewers themselves if there's a group of reviewers. Open manuscript posting, so this is posting your paper as a preprint, for example, prior to journal publication. Open final version commenting, so when you can comment on the final version of record of a paper. And also open platforms. So these are independent discussion sites that enable the community review of manuscripts. And you might say that our platform at PREreview is one of these. So something we also want to point out as part of this is that simply making something open doesn't necessarily mean that it's equitable. We all start from different points in life. We all have different levels of access and opportunities. So what is it that you think makes peer review more equitable? So open and equitable. Again, feel free to use the raise hand function or type any of your answers into the chat. I would say some of the things that people have said will also go towards making things more equitable. So for example, getting credit for the work that you do, making it openly available for everyone to participate in. These are also ways in which to make things more equitable. And again, there's no right or wrong answers here necessarily, just what you think. So yeah, inclusive participation. Any other suggestions? You can feel free to unmute as well if you prefer. Transparency, making review reports available. Transparency again. Yeah. So again, some of the things, and this is not a conclusive list, you could add to this list. Some of the things that we've got here as well also include enhanced transparency and trust. So increasing integrity and trust in the research process by making reviews more visible, making the process itself behind it more visible. Improve review quality, so giving people training opportunities and wider opportunities to engage in peer review ensures that people provide more detailed and constructive feedback. More accountability and fairness, so promoting fair evaluations by holding reviewers accountable for their feedback. So this could be via sort of public names on reviews. We also have a way at peer review as well, where we have a pseudonym option. So if somebody doesn't want to sign the review with their public name, there's still a way for us to be able to hold those people accountable. So if they violate our code of conduct in any way or provide feedback that's quite destructive to somebody, we can still link who that person is in the background without them having to sign their name publicly. Decreased risk of bias, so open platforms, open identities, transparent processes, these all help to reduce the risk of bias, promoting more fairness and objectivity in the review process. And also we can link that back to receiving training as well in this topic. Educational value for the community, so more learning opportunities and engaging early career researchers to peer review processes and letting people have more opportunities to engage. More constructive dialogue and collaboration. I know somebody also added that into the chat as well. So encouraging more dialogue between authors, reviewers, more public discussions, and increased citations and visibility. So again, this potentially can lead to higher visibility and citation rates, and receiving more credit for doing reviews as well, can help raise the recognition for this work that often goes hidden or behind the scenes.
Can I just say something real quick? A few years ago, we did a whole 3 days workshop with a group of international, it was very international, covering 4 continents out of 5. But we were thinking about what exactly means to bring peer, to think about equity in peer review, and definitely some of these things came up. But one of the things that continue to kind of come up in my mind is we think a PREreview, what can we do to decrease that gap between groups or between processes, and one thing that was brought up a lot was the fact that feedback given at different point in time, but even particularly early on in the research process, it is such a if we can find a way to open up and to bring communities in a constructive way that can help one another early on, would really be an equitable approach to kind of fill the gap early on. And specifically, there was an example of a researcher who was working in a very small department, and they were the only one working on a project on malaria. And he was saying, I have access to the malaria patients. He was based in Accra, in Ghana. And he was like, but the same work that I'm doing is done in a lab at Harvard with 25 postdocs, and I have no access to that kind of interactions with others that we can kind of brainstorm ideas and come up with, improve the research and do the work together, let alone that. So he was, for example, saying that preprints for him were very scary, because it's if I put my work that I've and my only advantage is that I have more access to the patients and to research here. But if I put it out early, I can very easily be scooped, by someone, and I don't receive that feedback. So I thinking of ideas in the space of scholarly communication and bringing new processes of how can we also think about that? How do we drive the resources away, or not away, but more, and we pay more attention in our solutions on how to help people that don't have as many people around, that don't have as many maybe resources in their own department and lab. So it's something that I keep thinking about, and I think it's just this one example. Thank you.
Thanks. Vanessa, you have your hand raised. Please feel free to unmute.
Yeah, actually, I just wanted to comment on what Daniela said, because the exact situation that you've just said have been raised with our trainees, especially when we were talking about pre-registration, you know, that open science, we were talking about the open science research framework, and then came the idea of pre-registration, and then this exact same fear that you've just said was mentioned, you know, because I don't have the resources that the global north has. So it might be dangerous for me to put my ideas out there or pre-register them. So one of the things that we said that, you know, open science is a big world. And I think it's okay that you take what would work for you. You know, you don't really have to do all the steps, do everything, but because definitely things that work in the global north will not work in the global south. So this is something that I like to again emphasize for our trainees. You know, it's not a take all or leave all in open science. You can take what benefits you and leave what you think is maybe dangerous for you or affects you. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's also because different power dynamics, right? And different like historical things. It is historically, countries located in the north have robbed of knowledge and resources other countries, and so like the fact that someone can come and rob you of your work is not that far-fetched, right? It's not a
Yeah,
fear.
it happened.
It
happened.
continues to happen. So I think
Yeah.
that makes sense. I think that what we need to find our balance, because of course it's like then you miss the opportunity to also maybe get the early feedback, like, so how can technology perhaps like help? So we were thinking about like building spaces that where like the community that kind of helps you or reviews your early work is not open to the whole world, but it's like a community with which you build trust along the way, and so it gets bigger. So thinking about how technology can't solve, you know, social issues, but they can help kind of like, I think, get there and get to the same point. So like it's a very interesting conversation. Sorry to derail, Vanessa, from your.
That's fine. Important things to add, so thank you very much. Okay, we will continue with a bit more of a recap. We've got one more exercise to do before we start on the rest of the reviewer guide. So last time as well, we also talked a bit about systems of oppression, how they affect us, our society, and how they affect science, and how science and peer review have not been created independent of these systems, but very much in line with these systems. And we need to be very mindful of this when we conduct peer review. And we also took time to go through the IDEA R2 method, which is an exercise that helps you to pause and reflect on your own biases so that you can mitigate them when you review other people's work. And if you want a reminder of this tool, there is a link in the chat to the bias reflection guide. We'll talk about it a little bit more when we start going through the level 2 content shortly. But if you would like to look more into that and look at how to practice it again, you can also review back the slides and the recording from level 1 too. So we're going to have a brief sort of breakout room exercise. So one of the things that we did talk about last time as well was when we talked about the traditional peer review process, we talked about some of the things that people would like to see changed. And some of the answers included these options. So there's more training in peer review, mandating preprint publishing, greater recognition of the work of peer reviewers, mitigating the impact of bias in peer review. So this could include gender, race, ethnicity, institutional bias, career level, lots of different things. And these are some of the things that we would like to see improved in the peer review process. So what we're going to do is go into some breakout rooms, and there will be a room for each of these topics, and you'll be able to select which room you want to go in. And when you're in your breakout room, we'll have 10 minutes, and we're going to discuss the following questions. So what would you need to do to implement this change that you would like to see in the peer review process? Who would be impacted by it? And then think about how you can reframe this aspect of peer review from an equity perspective. So how would this make peer review more equitable? You can make notes under your group name in the shared notes document, which again is linked to, and I know that hopefully everybody has access. If you don't, then please feel free to ask someone else in your group to be able to take notes that can edit the document. And just some guidelines for in breakout rooms. Please do remember to introduce yourself briefly and in any way that you would like to be known. Please do be kind, curious, and respectful of other people in your group. Try and speak for about 1/10 of the time. So if there are 5 people in your room, speak for about 1/5 of the time. Share one thing at a time, clearly. And feel free to also offer affirmations, clarifying questions, and suggestions. So I'm going to now open the breakout rooms, and hopefully this will work. So I've not done it quite this way before, but you should see an option to join one of 4 rooms. And if you'd like to just select which topic you would most like to discuss, you'll be able to go into it. And all of the questions that the discussion prompts as well, you can find in the notes document and from page 3 onwards.
Yeah, maybe Vanessa, do you want to just share the document now for a minute before people go into breakout?
I can try.
Oh, you can't. Okay, never mind. It's
Sorry, I've got so many things on my
Go on,
screen with breakout
yeah.
rooms and notes and everything.
Yes. It's again, as she said, in page 3, it starts with group 1, the training in peer review room. Group 2 will discuss mandating preprint publishing. Group 3, greater recognition for the work of peer reviewers. In group 4, the mitigating the impact of bias in peer review. The questions that are guiding the discussions are just there to guide. You don't have to just talk about those questions, but they are the same for each room. And they're pasted in the document as well in the chat. So yeah, thank you, Vanessa. And we are not gonna have a time to discuss back. So this is just really for you to take some time to discuss with your fellow colleagues.
Yeah, so just as Vanessa and Daniela said, like this is different than the breakout rooms that we had before. We usually assign you, but now we're giving you the freedom, you know, to pick the room that you want to join to get the conversation started.
Yeah, I don't see the rooms yet. You haven't opened them yet, Vanessa?
Yeah, they're open.
No, they're open.
Oh,
Oh, you are a co-host, right, Daniela?
yeah, breakout rooms. I see them now.
Oh,
Yep.
okay, perfect.
And if it didn't pop up on your screen, you might need to click on breakout rooms at the bottom of your toolbar in Zoom, and then you should be able to see them. Let us know if you have any difficulty or you can't find the rooms, and we'll help. I can assign people to a room. So if you're having any difficulty joining, let me know in the chat which room you would like to go into, and I can send you an invitation link to that room.
I can't find any room here. I can't see any room screen.
Okay, would you like to tell me which room you would like to join? And I can send you an invite for that room.
So Tony, which room would you like to join?
If you go down to the bottom of your thing, you should see, maybe you have a more, or like you should see breakout, and it opens up a pop-up window, and you should see that the rooms, and then you can click join. But Thomas and whoever doesn't have a room, if you tell us which room on the chat you would like to be sent to, we can send it to you to that. So you just put your name and then the number of the room that you want to join, and we can help you join.
Okay.
So as Vanessa said earlier, we're not assigning people to rooms. You can just choose a room. Okay, Thomas, I will send you to
Any.
about. I will send you to room 4. Oh, I'm joining myself.
Yeah.
That's nothing to do. Okay, you should see an invitation to go to room 4 now.
Someone can join room 2. At the moment, there's only one person.
Yeah, would anyone like to join room 2?
There you go. Someone left.
That's good.
Although if I've not joined, I'm not quite sure what's going on.
Yeah, we have.
I think sometimes it just takes some time to join the room.
Yeah.
This is the first time we tried this, so maybe it's just a learning point for us.
Oh, but it's nice. It's nice, I think. So Tony, would you like us to assign you to any room, or do you have a certain room in mind? So as for Zoe and Amino and Malumo. Okay.
It's optional, so if they would rather stay here, room 1 for me. Okay.
Zoe wants room 1.
Vanessa, I'll let you do it, so we don't double do it.
Wait, room 1. Room 1 is the most popular room, I would say.
Training in peer review. It's working. Whatever we're doing.
Yeah. Wow.
I'm not still able to get into a room.
I can send. Do you have a preference of which room?
No, not at all.
Okay,
Anyone will do.
I shall give you an invite to a room in that case. Send you to room 3. You should now see an invite to go.
How do I stay?
You just click join. You should have a prompt that tell you join. You have a pop-up box or something like that.
Maybe if you're on the phone, it may be.
Now it's here. Now we have Malumo. So I think we could just send him. Or what do you think, Malumo?
I don't see
It's
Maloma.
optional, so yeah, Vanessa, it's up to you.
Okay.
Also, Maloma's not on my list of people I can assign to a room, strangely.
Yeah, that's strange.
Okay, it's disappeared. I don't know why.
Yes.
Anyway, everyone is in rooms now. That took a while, so I'm gonna give people until like 9 minutes from now, until 22 hours,
Okay.
just so that everyone can actually have a conversation, because there was a little bit more difficulty in joining rooms.
Yeah.
That's just something to be mindful of for next time. So it'd be nice if people had the choice of which topic to discuss.
I'll broadcast a message and say sorry that took a while. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you.
We'll have 8 more minutes. Yeah.
Okay, people are coming back. That's nice.
People are coming back, but not coming back immediately, which is always a good sign.
Yeah, there's still conversation. Yeah, heated conversation. Yeah, people are staying until the last second. It's good.
I think everybody should be coming back now.
Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody. I hope you had some interesting conversations in your breakout rooms. We're not going to have like a reporting back session for this. This is more just a chance to share your reflections, go over a bit what we talked about last time. If you want to make any notes in the shared document, you can, and then those are available to everyone in the call. So if you want to share anything that you found particularly interesting from your breakout room, feel free to do it there. We're now going to move on to actually starting our level 2 training. So today we are going to go through writing a manuscript review. And yeah, we can share the link to the shared notes document in the chat once again. If Daniela, if you're okay to do that, thank you. Today we're going to go through some steps in our reviewer guide, which just help to keep things in mind as you go through writing a manuscript review, making sure that it is as clear, as constructive, as helpful to the authors as possible. And then after today, we're going to have an opportunity to put these steps into practice by collaboratively reviewing a preprint together and then publishing the review that we have written on PREreview.org. This will have DOI. You will have the option to be credited for your work on the review if you so wish. And we'll do this on July 15th. So we're going to have a brief survey after today's call. Well, there'll be an option of 4 different preprints, and you can vote for your favorite one, the one that you would most like to read and review. And then we'll let you know which one was the most popular after today. So you may remember from last time, we talked a bit about our Open Reviewers Toolkit. So these are some guides that we have that are available. These are some guides that we have available that you can freely access on Zenodo. They're all citable with a DOI. You can find all of the links to these on our resources page on our website. And you'll also have this slide deck as well afterwards for you to be able to access them whenever you'd like. The one that we're going to look at mostly today is the reviewer guide. What we looked at quite a lot in level 1 in the second workshop was the bias reflection guide. And this is where you can find sort of the, you can find this IDR2 method that we looked at in level 1 in the bias reflection guide. So in the reviewer guide, this takes you through a series of 6 different steps. So step 1 is to check your biases and assumptions, and this is what we did in level 1. Step 2 is to gain a conceptual understanding. So here you're going to read through the paper first of all, trying to keep your judgments to one side just while you read the paper and try and gain an understanding of it. Step 3 is identifying major and minor issues. Step 4 is making sure that your feedback is clear, constructive, and actionable. Step 5 is then putting all of your notes and your thoughts together into a coherent narrative before then finally in step 6, checking your review and sharing it. So you can have a look at the reviewer guide. Again, the links are in the chat and also in the slides. And it will have lots of space there for making some notes. It'll have more details that we're going to go through today, but generally it's a really useful guide that you can use freely. So as I mentioned, we went through step 1 last time in our workshop, but it's always important to do this again when you first start reading a manuscript. Keep in mind your own personal biases and how these may affect as you go through writing your review. We talked these through using some examples last time where we think of identifying or evaluating potential biases we might be bringing into the review, adding to these biases. So this might be putting some absolute words in. So is this always the case? Is this never the case? Seeing if that still makes sense. Reversing our beliefs. So for example, if we believe that this paper was written by someone who's works at a very reputable institution, do we believe that this is therefore going to be a good paper? Like, why do we believe that? Is that always going to be the case? Could there be cases in which a bad paper might come from this same institution? And then rephrasing our bias to make sure that we take this into account when we do our review of the paper. So it might be the case that, this institution that is well known for having high quality papers, but that doesn't mean that it's always every paper that's going to come from this lab is going to be a high quality. So I shouldn't necessarily judge it any more quickly than I would any other paper. So when we move on to step 2, which is gaining a conceptual understanding. So while this might seem obvious, what we would first recommend that you do on your first read through is to try and avoid evaluating and instead focus on understanding. So understanding what the research is about, what the main hypothesis is, the main questions, the proposed approach, the claims, the conclusions. It can be difficult because evaluative or judgmental thoughts will inevitably pop up as you're going reading through, but understanding before evaluating can help to mitigate the impact of personal biases. And it can also just help to structure our thoughts rather than diving straight in to making any review comments. Feel free to write down any questions or thoughts that you have along the way so you can focus more on just reading the paper and understanding it, and then you can come back to these questions later. So the goal during this step is to not look for flaws, but simply to understand the content. So I'm curious to know, when you do your own reviews, if you've ever reviewed a paper before, how many of you do this before you start your manuscript review? So if you would like to put a thumbs up on your screen, but if you do this step.
Yeah, just my comment in there is that even though we've been saying this step, and I literally wrote this step in the guide, it is so hard for me. Like, I still read anything that I read, I'm like that judgmental, like, and especially if I'm called to review something, I'm like, all right, just taking my judging hat and let's see what you did. And it's just so hard to like actually just take that away and really focus on understanding what is that we're reading before we get to the judging part or evaluating part. So I don't know, I still have issues doing that. I have to be very intentional.
I think that's perfectly natural as well. I think it's human nature to jump straight in and they start thinking of this, thinking of how to evaluate it, especially if that's what you're reading it in order to do. So it's quite hard to just step back from that.
And I want also to add that maybe because review has always been linked to this negativity. So when you're asked to review, now you automatically, as if you're asked to be negative, you know, and look for the negatives. So I think this is how the system has been structured for like the past, I don't know, 20 or 30 years. So it would be difficult definitely for us to like take that hat off, as Daniela said, and you know, try to do this step.
Yeah. And another thing, of course, is that one of the other things that feeds into sort of jumping into sort of looking at things in a critical lens straight away is that there's often time pressure. So because typically pools of reviewers are quite small, people are inundated with lots of review requests, there's this pressure to get things done quite quickly. And that's another reason why people might skip this step and jump straight into evaluating it quicker as well, rather than taking the time to actually read it through first and actually understand what the content that you're reading. Yeah, thank you for your comments in the chat, Daniela. I can see some other comments as well. You know, we don't know what went into the research, what researchers had to go to produce that research. So, you know, being mindful of that before we jump straight in with our critical comments. Most of us always look for the negativity in the article. First reading can never give you a complete view of the work until you get to the end, so it's not fair to be judgmental from your first read. Yeah, excellent comment. Any other comments about step 2 before we move on to looking at step 3 of the guide? Okay. So when we get to step 3, this is where we then evaluate, appreciate, and raise concerns. And you'll notice that we have the word appreciate in, because as we were just discussing a moment ago, you know, the stereotype is to look for things that are wrong with the paper rather than things that they've done right. Look for critical things, negative comments, whereas actually providing positive feedback is just as important. So on your second read through, you can begin identifying positive aspects of the research, as well as concerns that you may have about the project goals, the research question, the approach, methods, and so on. And you can highlight these, you can write them down in whatever way is useful for you to organize your notes later. And a note that we have here as well is that our goal at PREreview is to try and weave anti-oppression into everything that we do. And this includes identifying issues to do with bias and oppression that are within research papers as well. So if you notice things like that, those are things that you might also want to highlight within your comments. And you may have seen sometimes how concerns are presented either as major or core concerns and minor or peripheral concerns. So before I go on to this, we'll look at some examples in a moment, but major concerns typically are concerns that the author needs to address before the manuscript's recommended for journal publication, if it is going to be. Concerns that, if left unaddressed, could compromise the interpretation of the study. Minor concerns are concerns that authors should consider addressing to improve general readability and comprehension of the paper. So if these things are left unaddressed, it's not going to affect the actual interpretation of the study or the results in any major way, but there are things that you can do to improve the paper. So does anyone have any examples of what they think a major concern might be when you are reviewing a manuscript? Again, feel free to just do any suggestions, not necessarily right or wrong answers. And it's not like a perfect system. It's not like things that are definitely major and things that are definitely minor. It's very contextual. It's very dependent on what it is that you're reading and what it is that you think when you're reading the paper. Unclear methodology. Yeah, that would definitely affect reproducibility. Yeah, or issues to do with concerning the methodology. Yeah, inappropriate statistical analysis. Statistical analysis. Inadequate data, yeah. Again, these are all very good examples because they're all things that, you know, would affect anyone who's wanting to do the experiments again, for example. Sample size, yeah, definitely skew results.
There is an unclear hypothesis there, which I kind of want to comment briefly, because I was trained early on as an electrophysiologist, and there's old school, and then it's like every research work has to have a clear hypothesis. You have to know beforehand what is your hypothesis for that. That's like the scientific method, right? And I think that has actually really affected the way that people review other people's works, because there is also something sometimes called exploratory research. That doesn't mean that there is an hypothesis necessarily clear at the beginning. There is no like a prior, and statistically you can build that. I mean, if your model is all based on a prior, then you have to have one. But it's so interesting to me how even within those people that are like, you absolutely have to have an hypothesis, I've seen that hypothesis being one thing at the beginning of the research and then completely change in the end when we are rewriting our hypothesis just to fit the story. So if that's how we're supposed to be doing, I would rather have someone and say like, we didn't know what we're gonna discover. This is what we do, and this was an exploratory research. So I think we also don't want necessarily to say if there is not an hypothesis, this is not good research. I've seen that said by many faculty that are like famous around the world, and I just disagree. But if there is an hypothesis, it's not clear, that's different, right? If it's unclear, the research question, and we're going to see that we actually have questions like that throughout the live review when we review together. Just wanted to make this comment. Thanks.
Thanks, Daniela. You can see there's lots more examples in the chat as well, which is great. Yeah, conclusions that I don't sort of are inconsistent with the research question and the data, but don't completely capture what's been done. Objectives that conflict with the methodology, again, like Daniela just covered some comments about that. Misalignment of discussion versus results. Yeah. Cute. And we've got some other examples as well on the slide. Again, these are just examples, but some things that you might consider as more major concerns. So again, unethical approaches to the research question, data collection or analysis. Conclusions that are not supported by the data. We've already said that in the chat as well. Contradictory conclusions, not accounting for study limitations or major confounding variables that can affect the results, or not discussing those appropriately. Or any issues with the experimental design. So as somebody already gave the example of, insufficient sample size of data, improper controls, inappropriate methodology, inappropriate statistical analysis. So yeah, very good. Excellent examples, better than I could have come up with. And then in terms of minor concerns, these are some things that we might think of when we think of some more minor things. So there might be technical clarifications, how the data is presented or visualized, typos, spelling, grammar, phrasing issues. We'll address that little star there in a moment, or missing or wrong citations. So while it may be tempting to focus on grammatical errors, on sentence structure or choice of words, please do remember that you're not a copy editor, and poor spelling or grammar does not necessarily equal poor research. So I think this is something we also covered in level 1 when we were going through the IDEA-R2 method. We talked about, you know, someone might have an opinion that maybe this is written and English isn't your first language, and therefore some of the grammar isn't quite right. That doesn't mean that the science itself is bad or that the experiments are wrong or anything like this. So although these things can sort of maybe hinder general readability and therefore could be considered a minor concern, it's not necessarily meaning that the overall quality of the research is bad. And we also have a note here about reviewing citations. So citations are hard to review, and it's well known that many researchers tend to cite work that others or themselves in other publications have cited, so famous works. And the obvious problem here is that if someone made the mistake of citing a publication once, that can get perpetuated indefinitely. And another problem that's perhaps less obvious is that it's easy to cite the famous people, the famous studies, the big things that have lots of publicity. And because science operates in the context of systemic oppression, it's no surprise that citations then reflect the implications in all of these systems. So whoever gets cited more tends to have more opportunities, tends to be more well regarded. So what we can do to be better at reviewing citations is we need to self-assess our own citation practice, question whose voices are represented in the work that we do and whose work is cited. And there is a tool that you can have a look at here that we're also going to share the link to in the chat to try and evaluate your own citation practices. So we should always recommend a diverse citation library, but we can't necessarily recommend it if our knowledge ourselves isn't as diverse. So it's just a thing to be mindful of when we're reviewing citations. It's not always the big names that we should be citing. And Daniela, I think you added the slide, and I don't know if you've got anything additional that you want to add about it more than what I've said.
Oh, no, this is, it's really difficult. And it's like, you know, scholarship and rewards and they're all based on citations in this particular point in time. So it is actually kind of it is a note here because it's really hard to address it, but it's also like such an important thing. If we can all be better at citing, like there was a whole movement, and there is still a whole movement of like cite Black women, not just like in research, but like books and just like the whole history. And it's you know, it's again part of that equity aspect. Like how can we pay extra attention to this part, because we know that there is a huge bias that has occurred there, and it's written in history, right? And it's so it's just difficult, and I think it's just helpful to have it in mind and reflect on it when we are citing. One thing that I'm going to put in the chat is there are some also, again, technology things, something that is trying to help. This is not specifically to help this issue, but I think it can help on the side of like, oh, I can, the other issue with citations that we may cite something and it's not clear if you got cited because your work was wrong or it was in opposition to the point that this other research was doing. So citation is just an imperfect metric in general. And there is a work at technology, a technological site, I think site. I'll put it in the chat, .ai, and they're trying to like bring context, like why was that work cited? So just to check it out, and I have there is like a basic plan that is free, and I think you can access to like kind of the next tier. And if someone is interested in exploring that, I have a connection with the people that work at site.ai, and I'm happy to ask for like a kind of free exploration of the tool if you're interested. This is not really advertising. It's something that I know the person who funded it, and I find their work pretty relevant for these concepts. Thanks.
Thanks, Daniela. And yeah, I'm sure we could have a whole session just on citations and the whole things that are wrong with the whole practice of counting citations, but we can just do what we can to try and improve the system. So we're now going to go into a 5-minute break. So we'll come back at, I think, 6 minutes past the hour. So feel free to step away, get a drink, stretch your legs, and we'll be back in 5 minutes.
Yeah, and we can pause recording.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Welcome back. Thank you so much, Vanessa, and everyone for the discussion that we just had in the first part. Let me go in slideshow. There we go. Everyone see my screen? Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. Now I'm not going to see you all. So if someone needs something, please unmute or write in the chat. Okay, so we are on step 4 of, I keep forgetting, we have 6 steps, I think we do, of the guide. And again, these are just indicative steps, so there could be, probably this guide should be updated, right at this point, but I think that they still kind of, I still like this process to go through the review. It still works for me, but you can move these things, and nothing is written in stone, and there's never one way to do things. But step 4 is one of my favorite after the bias reflection step in step 1, and it's give clear, constructive, and actionable feedback. So what do we mean by that? Well, clear feedback is feedback that if we are clear about what we're trying to tell someone, and that is like, it's true anywhere. Like if I'm clear to give feedback to my husband or my daughter or, you know, Vanessa, when we work together, it is more likely to be interpreted correctly. Like, so the person who's receiving the feedback actually understands. So like trying to be clear about what is exactly that we have an issue with, or what is exactly that we love about what we're reading, it is more likely to be well understood and well taken. Well taken, I don't know, because clear enough is not, it could be clear, but also clearly unconstructive, right? And so constructive is also important. So it's like when we try to give feedback, if we do it in a way that is clear, but also the goal of that feedback is to help someone else without being condescending, but we're really trying to help whoever we're giving feedback to, give them an opportunity for reflecting on that feedback. And maybe they can say, you know what, I actually don't think that's right. But you still, you know, come from that space of humility where like, I can offer you this feedback and you can take it or leave it. And I think that that's very important with peer review as well. And it is more likely to be well received rather than unconstructive feedback. We're going to have some examples that are very dramatic, but I think we can picture, I'm sure that you all can picture some bad feedback in your lives. And then if it's possible, feedback should also be actionable. And with actionable, we mean providing suggestions, if you have them, on how that feedback or how the issue that you have found could be addressed. So if there is a concern on something and you have a suggestion, it might not be the right answer, but you can say, we're going to see again an example, like I actually have there's this website, or there's this other researcher that they were doing something similar. You may want to kind of like check this out, or there's this other citation that you can explore. So like give something that the receiver of the feedback can kind of act on. And this is, again, not always something that you want to do, but if you do have some clear example, like, oh, these other statistical tests would be better, and we're going to see that that very example right now, provide it in a way that is not like, you know, you have to do this, but as an offer. So before we go, actually, this is the example, sorry. Let's make, the example is that we have a concern that, and some of you put inappropriate statistical methodology as a major concern. It could be a major concern. And let's say that the way that the reviewer has expressed this concern is by saying that the author should go back to Statistics 101, which means the very first class of statistics you have in college. This is not made up. This is actual some feedback that someone received. Obviously, this is, you know, clearly not a very good kind of feedback. It's not clear. What do they mean? It's destructive. It makes the person feel very defensive. It's like, how dare you just like, you know, question my education. Or it can make you feel very ashamed. Maybe you already feel like you shouldn't be there. You have this like imposter syndrome, and that critique can actually drive you out of science, like, and that has happened. And it's also not actionable. What do I do with that? Like, I can't actually go back to Statistics 101, right? So very bad way of communicating your concern. A better way to communicate your concern is a little more wordy. There's more words in here, but more likely to be appreciated and well understood and acted upon is this one. So the example, let's forget about the actual statistics here, but we can say statistical test X that was used in the paper is typically used for data that is distributed normally. So like under a Gaussian or a bell curve. It doesn't matter what really this is, but the data presented in this manuscript appear to be highly skewed to the left. So it's not distributed normally. This type of distribution requires a non-parametric version of text X, which makes no assumption about the parameters of the distribution of data. I suggest the use of test Y. If the choice of text X is motivated by a particular strategy or other non-obvious analytical constraints, I recommend to explicitly mention that in the methods section, justifying the choice accordingly. So let's dissect. It doesn't matter what this example is about, but we want to dissect what are the elements that we use to build this critique, right? So first, I don't know why statistical text X. Oh yeah, it is the personalization. So forget about that, but we start with the interpretation. So we want to say what is the issue that we are seeing, and why we think, right, it's a reason. Like, what's the reason that we think it's an issue? So we first say, you know, the data is presented in a manuscript appear to be highly skewed. That's an observation. And we interpret that, right? It appears to be, maybe that we were looking at it and it's not actually skewed, but we perceive it that way. So we want to be humble even in how we reflect, because the authors know so much more than we do, right? So we might be wrong in a way that we read and interpret that issue or that result. And then we give it a reason. Why do you think it's an issue? This type of distribution, this is what usually this is what I think when I see that data. And so then there is a recommendation. If I have a recommendation, that's action, let's try, right? It's a suggestion. You can use test Y. However, if you actually have a reason to use a text that is not clear to me, maybe make it explicit so someone else that reads it also gets it. So there is that humble piece, right? I might be wrong in what I'm saying. You may have the reason, but I just don't get it. So can you make it easier for me to read and for the reader? So the other bit that is here in light blue is this depersonalization. So now here there's a lot of like different things, but you know, my grammar teacher would say never use something that is not something that can make an action as the subject. Like statistical text is typically used. The text, I guess here is like a passive choice, or it's a passive form. Anyway, who cares about grammar? The point is that there's some research that shows that if you give feedback in a way that doesn't actually say like the authors should have done that or the authors did that, it makes it feel less kind of aggressive and personal if you don't call the authors out. I think that there's debates and there is way to be constructive even actually using the authors as action, people who make the action in this, but it doesn't matter. These are just some suggestions. Are there any comments or questions about this structure, or did they make any sense before I move on? Let's see. I can't see the chats. But...
Nothing in the chat at the moment.
Right. Thank you. So now we're actually gonna practice this. And this is the second breakout that we're gonna have today. And what we're gonna do is that we're gonna take 10 minutes in breakouts. And I think that this time, Vanessa, you're making breakouts the old way. So we're gonna, there's different people going into different breakout rooms. And there are 4, I think we're making for this group. And if you go to the notes document and you scroll down to the second exercise, I'm not sure what page it is right now, but there's gonna be page 5. There is gonna be group 1, group 2, group 3, group 4. Group 1 and group 3 have the same example, and group 2 and group 4 have the same example as well. And so what we would like you to do is so maybe I should stop sharing this and share the other page. So we can look at we try to format it the same way that we had it. So that's why I don't need to stop sharing. I just need to get away from here. Okay, so let's go to the document here. So if I scroll to make it bigger. So this is page 5. So group 1 has this example, right? Unclear, destructive, and non-actionable is the writing. So your concern here is that the writing there's some issues with the writing, whatever. The writing is terrible. I can barely understand what the authors are trying to say. Obviously not a great comment. Regardless if this is a minor or major concern, what we would like you to do is to try to rewrite this comment using this kind of explaining what the issue is, the reason why you think it's an issue, recommendation, and if you can depersonalize, it's a plus, but you don't have to. Then the second group is going through this other example, the experimental design is severely flawed and needs significant improvement. It is not up to the standard required for publication in this journal. So if you can make this comment better using this recipe, that could be fun. Don't feel like you have to be perfect, just trying and reflect on how to make something that is non-constructive, non-clear, non-actionable into something that it is. And this group 3 and group 4 have the same 2 examples. So now I'm going to stop sharing, or actually, is there? Yeah, so that's it. We're gonna have 10 minutes in the breakout, come back, discuss, and then we're gonna finish with the other points. We have 40 more minutes, so I think we are in a good spot. And are there any questions before we open up the breakout? Okay, if you have time to put the notes, if your connection doesn't work very well and you just want to work on text, you can work on text and perhaps work with the chat with your fellow breakout people. And if you need any help, you can call help on the Zoom and we'll come in the room and facilitate or answer a question. All right, breakout rooms are open. I hope.
Not yet, they are. I'm
They're
about
not.
to.
They will be.
They will be in just a second.
They're about to be open.
So I think, yes, that's better. Okay, so there will be 4 rooms, as we said. Please do find your bit in the shared notes document to work on. Opening the rooms now, and you should now see an invite to join a room. So unlike last time, you're just going to automatically join a room this time.
Thank you, Vanessa. And if you need us to add you to a room, we can also, I don't know, maybe we can send you another invite. I don't think we can add people forcefully. I'm not sure. I keep forgetting what the...
Not forcefully, we can resend you an invite if
right.
you can't see it.
Right. But it's optional. You're welcome to stay here. And maybe we should pause recording for these 10 minutes. Thank you, Emmanuel. Welcome back. Okay, so I wanted to acknowledge that it is challenging to make up things, right? And we don't have the paper in front of us. We will in the next time we're gonna get together. We're gonna have a preprinted. We're gonna pick and we're gonna review together. So it's gonna be much easier to actually trying to be intentional to write something that you actually know what you're writing about. So I want to recognize the fact that this was not the easiest of things, but hopefully it gave you, it just prompted your thoughts around like, how can you make such an example? Yeah, it was tricky. I think you know, once you start, like now I can think of any different, you know, ways that I can, you know, make an example of, but it's not easy if you have not done that before. So I wonder, we have a few minutes, up to 10 minutes, I think, of discussion here. Things that I would love first to see if people from each group, 1 or 2 people top would like to share highlights, even like difficulties that they have from the discussion. So we can start with group 1. How was it? Does anyone from group 1 would like to share their experience or any thought around this particular step? That this example or this practice may have led to. Yes, please, Samira. And then Michael afterwards.
Hello, I'm from group 2 actually. We had a problem in depersonalization, in the depersonalization sentence. So that's the issue that we faced.
I see. I mean, I think I'm looking at what you wrote in group 2. So depersonalization is kind of also weird, and I probably didn't explain it very well because I was going into grammar. That's like, I grew up with like, just the grammar was like my bread. The experimental design is not clear. That's like depersonalization. Like, you're not saying like the authors use a design that was unclear. So you are kind of using the experimental design as the subject of your sentence. So you're like centering it around like it's the design that is not clear, rather than saying like, oh, authors write things in a very unclear way. So I think that, you know, that was already present in the unclear one. So I don't think it was a problem. It looks like you did it pretty well. And you wrote, consider using methodology X rather than Y, as X is more preferred in this type of research. If you think that, you know, this is why it's, you don't have an example, but design Y is more suitable, please state that in methodology section clarification. Right. So I think, you know, just trying, it's kind of similar to the first example. that we gave. So yeah, anyone else that would like to comment on their experience? Or Samira, would you like to add anything else?
Just clear now.
Thank you. Anyone from any group that would like to share?
Hi. This is Michael from Group
Hi,
One.
Michael. Mhm.
Yeah. So the discussion that we had in our group, we tried to look at the sentence. We felt that it was pretty. Maybe the person went too personal. I think the writing is terrible. We felt that this could be a little bit polite. So we rewrote and said the writer could benefit from being written coherently and worded differently. And then we tried to make a recommendation by adding, please make it very clear and sections, make the sections of the results a little bit more clear, ensure that to put the write-up more clearly and so that it is easily understood by the readers. So we thought that that could try and capture all the concepts that we had in the session. Thank you, and over to you.
Thank you for that. And I think that the example of group 1 and 3 was a little bit trickier because they really don't have anything there. Like, what does it mean? It's kind of like go back to statistics 101, right? You have to make up a new example. But things that I found, like, for example, when I had to give feedback to something that was on the written side, not even thinking about the grammar, but I'm actually thinking about, like, for example, sometimes I found that the introduction has already the results in them. Well, move those parts. It's just like the linear, the way that a reader can think. And that could be my personal opinion. So I made suggestions on moving parts of from the introduction to the results or vice versa, and to kind of improve the readability. And that's just the example that I would have made just because of my experience. But any example really works. I think it's just you want to have suggestions on whatever you are finding unclear or terrible, which don't use the word terrible, obviously, is a good start. Khadija?
Thank you. Also from group 1, we discussed that the reaction of the reviewer was quite harsh, and it's something that could, condemn or bring down the motivation of the writer, of the author. And of course, something like that could discourage the person entirely. And we suggested better words that could have been used, the way the reviewer should have, put his words in order to make the comments more constructive, and also, trigger a kind of a positive reaction from the author in a way that would make the person do the work better. Constructive criticism rather than bringing the author down or whatever effort that might have gone into the work. Thank you.
Thank you. That's actually a point we're going to look at in the next slide. So thanks for bringing it up. Sahar.
I have a question because I think we were not on the same page when it comes to defining what is nice enough and what is not nice, because I suggested saying the experimental design has some significant weaknesses, and some of my colleagues thought that the word significant weaknesses is also not so well received by researchers. So what do you think?
So I think that, it's really hard to make it when you don't know what the weakness is. So you have to be creative about, if you want to be clear, you also have to explain what the weakness is. So then it's think about a weakness in an experimental design, and it's just 10 minutes might not be enough to be creative about an actual scientific weakness you can make up with. So I totally get it. One actually thought that I had is that the part of addressing the standard required for publication is a tricky one because it's like, what are the standards? Like, is it, you know,
Exactly.
publication, you know, here at PREreview, we don't even care about publications in terms of journals, but I think, I mean, we do care, but not what we do. And we're journal independent, so like thinking about, but if there are like standards, like what are, can you point to the guidelines? So like, does the publication, or is it just a made up standard based on how much marketing that journal has done and how much brainwash we all received to know that science is the best and we should only high quality can go there? What does it mean? Who decides what standard is standard? What is standard, like the high standard, what's low standard? So I think that is where I would say like that's not clear, and it's also perhaps upholding some deeper problem. And I'm not judging I think it's really hard to do in this case, but like let's see that the journal has some guidelines and they say, actually, many journals do, right? They say like, no, the experimental design has to be clearly articulated. Here are some examples. I think PLOS actually has really good guidelines on how to write something, even for the authors. So maybe that is what you're meaning. And then you can say, and here's a link to some guidelines on how to, you know, write the experimental design in a clearer way, for example. Again, I'm making it up. So I think that you can say that way, but like the important thing is that you back it up with some sort of, like, make it, you know, very clear what is that is problematic and has weaknesses. But again, it's really hard to do when you don't have the actual facts to make the example about. So hopefully this was just a little bit of practice that then we can actually take to the real world next time. So thank you. Anyone else? Anyone that has received comments that you read them and you're like, and it doesn't have to be a peer review in your manuscript, but maybe like something you've wrote and someone read it, but like, oh my gosh, this is terrible. Like, I think my PI, my PhD boss said that his boss would always comment WTF. So, which obviously I'm gonna be recorded. It's like, what the fuck, right? Great comment. And he's like, that's what my PI would just comment WTF in all my writings. And that was it. How is that useful? I don't know. But we're talking about a PI that is like a world-renowned scientist in the United States. And that was his way of providing feedback to his trainees. So now he made it a case to make it better for me, and he didn't do WTF. But did you receive comments that were completely useless and tore you down and made you not want to go through? I wonder if anyone wants to share their experience, if they feel comfortable. We can pause recording if that's helpful. Thank you for that rich discussion. And this next slide is still relevant to that. Now we saw some comments. I think that were or you know, what was shared in general. There are some comments that you're like, I can't believe that these are real. And here we have a study that looked at the effects of unprofessional reviews and how they disproportionately harm. They refer them to underrepresented groups in STEM. This was a survey of, I forgot how many times in the notes, and I'm not looking at the notes right now, but if you look at, it was like a broad survey across disciplines, or disciplines in the science, technology, and math, engineering and math, and how groups that are self-defined as underrepresented in these fields are disproportionately harmed by this. And you can believe why, right? Because if you're already experiencing aggressions and microaggression, big or small aggressions in the world constantly. So then if you also experience that in academia, it makes you even more likely to leave. So this was an anonymous, okay, I had some ideas here, and they invested the pervasiveness and author perceptions of long-term implications of receiving unprofessional comments. Long-term implications such as, you know, all the way from like not applying for a job or never publishing the article, like we will shared, or like leaving the field altogether. We brought here some examples. These are real comments that they found and they analyzed. So this paper is simply manure. It's poop. That was the comment of the author. What the authors have done is an insult to science. I don't think I need to comment why these are terrible, but also great. The author's status as a trans person has distorted his view of sex beyond the biological reality. So attacking on identity, very homophobic, so on top of being useless. The author's last name sounds Spanish. I didn't read the manuscript because I'm sure it's full of bad English. This is one of the most common and one of my favorite, if not, right? But it's just very common. So this is just like, I think, one more motivation to really be conscious about how we provide feedback, because it can also work against maybe our way of providing equity. So if there is, perhaps we may recognize that there are some like identities and some vulnerability in the author's identity there, we can even like try to be even more helpful. That's kind of my way to be, to provide kind of equitable feedback. There is a comment in the chat that popped up. Oh, thank you for the reference. Okay. I'm gonna go ahead in the interest of time. Now we're in step 5. Now we've wrote all the awesome not coherent, it's uncoherent still at this point. If you're me, I'm still jotting down things and trying to make it just individual concerns and write them constructively. And what we would like to do, and this is again, one way that you can write your review, is to have it in a way that just starts with a head and ends with a toe, right? So it has a beginning and the end. And again, it doesn't have to be, you can put comments that don't have a beginning or end, but this is what we're trying to do next time that we do the live review together. We're gonna start with a summary paragraph that summarizes and provides an overview of the research. This is what we understood that the research question was. These are maybe one strength, and this is one major weakness, and just to give an introduction. And the summary paragraph is very useful if well written, written in a way that is constructive, because it kind of like the reader of the review, even the authors themselves or the editors who are reading the review can kind of understand how the reviewer, the science in general, what was their idea of the manuscript. And then we can move into the kind of important part, the core part of the review, which we're going to structure as a list of major concerns that need to be addressed in order for that research to stand and to be trustworthy, or the conclusions are like make sense and all that, and the list of minor concerns. And if we can, we should be obviously as clear, as constructive as possible. And if we can add an action to each one of those issues. Here's also when we can provide the positive feedback, and maybe it's at the end in other points. I really like when people spend time thinking about what is a practice that I will change as a result of reading this work. I think that that's very helpful to hear from the author's perspective. Oh, I made an impact. Like the reader actually appreciated this work, and that reinforces that good behavior for the next time. And this is adapted from, like PLOS again has very good resource. I hope, I've never checked the link. I hope that those resources are still available, because I looked them I led them a long time ago now. Okay, step 6, and I am going to wrap up. This is the last point. We're gonna just, check that the review is what we want it to be. We can re-go through the steps and think about them as we reread our own work. And then we can share it, and it just depends on what you're doing. If you are sharing it with the editor because you were asked it from a journal, you send it to them. If you're publishing on PREreview, you can, whatever it is that you want to share it, that you're sharing your review with. Or maybe you're just sharing it with your author, or maybe you're just sharing it with your colleague that asked you to review their manuscript. So now we have a little bit of what's next for these modules. So we have one more time together, and that is July 15. And during that session, it's going to be, again, 2 hours. So we will collaboratively review a preprint. And this is something that we do routinely. They're called live reviews. We have just a Google Doc. It's 100% interactive. So expect to come and interact by writing on the document, writing in the chat, unmuting. And there's going to be different ways to interact, and hopefully some options for everyone on whatever device you're joining from. We need to pick a preprint for that. So the first step to get to that July 15 is that by July 1st, so by next week on Monday, you pick one of the preprint that we selected. And these, I think Vanessa did this work. So Vanessa went and looked through preprints for which the authors have asked help. So the authors, they have a way on PREreview, anyone has a way on PREreview to request for feedback, but there are also specific ways that if you submit to, for now, just bioRxiv and CLO preprints, as an author, you can request feedback from PREreview. So we have a list of preprints that need help. So we picked from there, and there are, I think, 4, Vanessa, correct me if I'm wrong. I can go to the complete forum about that and do that. So if I go to complete forum, and the link should be in the chat, you are invited to vote. So there are 4 preprints: empowering future scientists, exploring how mentors guide students to write and publish scientific papers, 1. Open science and the generative AI turn, an exploratory analysis of challenges and opportunities, impact of green manuring. Here you go. We have manuring here, but probably in a better context. And nitrogen fertilization on rice cultivation, a Peruvian Amazon forest study, a path to education 5.0, digital ethics as a driver of innovation in higher education institutions. So we have different fields. Pick what your favorite, select it and submit. So then whatever of these preprints gets the most votes, we'll be reading together. It doesn't really matter. We try to pick preprints that have a broad. So if you're not an expert in manuring and fertilization, we can still provide feedback. So choose your pick, and then after that, we'll reach out and we'll give you more information on what it's requested of you. But really what it is that we ask you to read the preprint. We ask you to please reflect on step 1. Before you read the preprint, think about your own assumptions and biases. What are you bringing to that experience? And actually, I invite you to think about that before you even get there. What preprint you choose may already have infused some bias, especially if you go and look at who are the authors? Where are they from? Please don't use those criteria to choose, but that is something that naturally we may do. And if you do and observe that and then report back, we're going to reflect on that and then read it for understanding. Try to do step 2. And then together, we're going to do all the other steps. So you just need to read it, try to be open, reflect on your biases, and then come to July 15th, and we'll do that together. Vanessa, am I missing anything?
No, I think that's everything. I'll also add some links in the chat just at the end. If you've not already signed up to our newsletter and things like this, if you want to stay in touch with us at PREreview, I'll share some links in the chat on how to do that.
So while Vanessa is doing, are you done, Vanessa? Please, sorry if I interrupted you.
No, please go ahead.
The good news is that when we asked you for the post-training survey, open peer review was one of the most requested topics that you wanted to learn more about. So we actually are going to do a second live review with you guys, which will be kindly done by Sahar. And Sahar, I'm proud to say that she's my student. I know I sound old now, but she's my student, one of the best students that I've ever met. And she's also a peer review champion. So thankfully, she agreed to guide you guys through a second live review, which will happen by the end of July. So maybe what we will do is that if there were two, pick the top 2 ranked preprints from the vote, and these will be the 2 that we would review on the 15th of July and on the 31st of July. Yeah, so this is what I wanted to add.
Thank you, Lamis, and thank you, Sahar, for volunteering, and we're here to support you in doing that live review. And if you want an example of what the output of that live review may look like, that's in the chat. We do at least once a month of these live reviews in collaboration with JMR Publications. What I want to say is that there's going to be options for you to sign the review and have your ORCID recognize that contribution. There's also going to be options for you to use a pseudonym or to not put your name at all, but still get through the experience. So hopefully we have some options for everyone. And sorry for going over 1 minute, but thank you everyone for being here. And I think we can stop recording. If there are any questions, we can stay here a couple more minutes. Thank you, everyone.